In this section, we're going to talk about demand, and we're going to introduce this by defining a key concept, and that is the law of demand. The law of demand states that as price increases, quantity demanded decreases, and as price decreases, quantity demanded increases. Now, when we think of demand, think of what consumers or we as people who buy things we want. So if I want to buy a good, I want to buy a widget. If that widget is expensive, I'm going to be less likely to buy it than if it's very cheap. If a widget is very cheap, I'm going to buy more of them. And that is what the law of demand is saying. So let's introduce a graph to define this. On the y-axis we have price. On the x-axis we have quantity, or how much I buy. And it's going to be sloped like this. So let's say here it's $4, here it's $2, and this is for widgets. Here it's, it's 3 widgets, here it's 7 widgets. So if the company that sells widgets, widgets are often a generic term for a good. Widgets don't actually exist, but people use it to explain concepts. So a widget factory. If the widget factory sells widgets for $4, I'm going to buy 3 widgets. If the widget factory sells widgets for $2, I'm going to buy 7 widgets. This is a demand curve. This curve describes how much I'm going to buy at different prices. How much I buy is the quantity, or quantity that I buy. This brings us to our next graph. This is the same graph. It just looks a little more formal. We have our price on the y-axis, the different prices that are charged. We have the quantity, or how much is bought, on the x-axis. Point A is a certain quantity is bought, a certain price. So it's just like this point right here. Point B is just like this point right here. We charge less, so we sell a greater quantity. And this is our demand curve. So demand, which is like the demand curve, is the quantities, which is plural. This is important. Quantities that will be bought at different prices. So the whole thing's the demand curve. But a quantity demanded is a specific quantity that will be demanded at a certain price. So this demand curve right here, this is demand. It describes, at each different price, plural, at each different price, how many quantities am I buying? But if I just take one point, this is quantity demanded. It describes a specific quantity that's determined by this price. It's specific. Quantity demand is specific. Plural is demand. The whole thing's demand. Now, there are a few more concepts we need to introduce. We need to talk about movement along a demand curve and just a shift of the demand curve. So, if we're going from point A to point B, so the widget factory charges price A, it starts charging price B. That's a movement along the demand curve because the quantity is going to change. We're just moving along this curve. It's not shifting, it's just moving. However, let's say for some reason, let's say that I win the lottery. I win the lottery. So, I have my demand curve. My demand curve is this, before winning the lottery. But I win the lottery, so I have a lot more money. So, my demand curve is going to shift. So at any price, I'm going to buy more widgets. I'm going to buy a greater quantity of widgets, and that is a shift in demand. So if I shift this way, if the demand curve shifts to the right, that's a shift to the right, or an increase in demand. In this case, where the demand curve moves to the left, that's a shift to the left or a decrease in demand. Now, there are a lot of factors affecting demand that cause shifts, just like we talked about here. The first is income, which I just introduced. If my income increases, my demand curve shifts to the right because I'll buy more of anything at any price. The price of other goods, like substitute or complements. So, let's say I'm looking at my demand curve for Coca-Cola. If the price of Pepsi decreases, I'm going to buy Pepsi instead of Coke. So my demand curve for Coke shifts to the left because at any price I'm going to buy less Coke because I'm just going to buy more Pepsi because it's cheaper. Another thing is taste. Taste is like, what's cool now? So, CDs and iTunes music. I'm sure like one day in time, people bought a lot of TVs because that bought a lot of CDs because that was a cool thing. But iTunes came around and replaced that. So because of taste, the demand for CDs decreased. The demand curve for CDs shifted to the left or decreased. Another factor affecting demand is expectations. This means, what's going to happen in the future. So if I think that I'm going to lose my job, my demand curve is going to shift to the left because I think I'm going to have less money to spend, so I'm going to buy less. Another thing is taxes and subsidies. If taxes decrease, I have less money, so demand shifts to the left. If there's a subsidy for a good or the government helps pay for it, my demand curve shifts to the right because it's cheaper. Now there are two types of goods we need to talk about. There are normal goods, and there are also inferior goods. So for normal goods, this is what we normally think about. And this is, as income rises, demand for normal goods increases or shifts right. So let's think magazines. If my income increases, I'm going to buy more magazines. But let's talk about inferior goods. So for inferior goods, as income rises, demand for the inferior good decreases or shifts left. So it's shifting from here to here. The curve shifts left. So as I become poorer, I lose my job, I make less money, I start buying more of these goods. So it's usually goods we think of as being less desirable. So Spam, that gross meat stuff in a can. People that make a lot of money don't usually eat Spam. So if my income decreases, my demand for Spam increases because it's an inferior good.